In this video, I'll give you my predictions for UFC 302. As always, you can call me Kunith. Let's make some money this week. The lightweight title is on the line in Newark, New Jersey in the Prudential Center, a place that I went a few years ago to see Tony Robbins and Walk on Fire, magical place. Now, can Dustin Poirier dial up some magic in that same building? I'm not so sure that he will, because we've had a pretty strong read on Dustin Poirier as of late. We accurately predicted a knockout loss against Justin Gaethje. We accurately predicted a knockout win over Benoit Saint-Denis. It's interesting to see the narrative change with Dustin Poirier fight after fight. I feel like it's more than recency bias. I feel like it's something a bit more than that because of his status. The guy's been at the top of the heap for so long, fighting the best of the best, but I feel like fight to fight, the public perception changes of him quite a bit. For example, he was favored to beat Charles Oliveira. He loses that fight, but then he goes out there, beats Michael Chandler in impressive fashion, and it seemed like everybody was back on his side. Most people thought he would beat Justin Gaethje in the rematch, but he loses that fight, and it seems like the vast majority of fans online just turn their back on him right then and there. He's washed. He's retired. There's no clear path to the belt anymore. He's done enough. There's nothing left for him to do. They match him up with Benoit Saint-Denis. Oh, Benoit Saint-Denis is going to run through him. Going into it, it was obvious that Dustin Poirier was the better striker. I felt like he was the tougher fighter, and I knew he would have more to give after the first round. That's what happens. He puts Saint-Denis out cold. Gives us one of the most exciting MMA moments of the year. Now, I say all that to say this. It seems like a lot of people, not the majority of people, because people are objective, they think that Islam Makhachev's the best fighter in the world, and he very well might be. But as I look online, I do see a lot of people making the case for Dustin Poirier. What if he jumps guillotine? What if he cracks Islam Makhachev and intercepts him on his way in? Something like that. I don't think any of those things are going to happen. You've got Islam Makhachev, who has a great chin. Doesn't matter that he was knocked out once before, the chin has held up. He's got elite cardio, and of course he's worlds better when it comes to the grappling. Not only that, but he has very high fight IQ, so I expect him to get takedowns here, but he's not going to offer the chance for the guillotine. You, me, and everybody else watching knows that Dustin Poirier will jump that guillotine every chance that he gets. He even did it against Khabib, which is absurd. That's a low percentage technique that's not going to work on high-level grapplers all that often. Just look at Charles Oliveira slapping it on Arman Tsarukyan. Charles Oliveira might have the best guillotine in the game, couldn't even get Tsarukyan out of there because it's a low percentage choke. But even if it's low percentage, I don't see Makhachev giving him the opportunity. I think he's going to avoid that technique completely by still getting his takedowns, but he's not going to be shooting for single legs and double legs or anything like that. I expect him to crash distance, work his trips, work his throws in the clinch, and consistently get the fight to the ground. And he might not finish him in the first or the second or the third, but eventually he's going to find his back, and I think that's where he gets a rear naked choke. Plus, on the feet, I don't think the gap is all that wide. We know that Dustin Poirier is the better boxer, has cleaner hands, of course, but we've seen Islam Makhachev striking get better and better with each fight. So I could see Makhachev hurting him with the hands as well, but that's just a means to an end. He's still going to get his takedowns, he's still going to get the fight to the ground, and that's where he wins. So give me the favorite, the toughest fight in the UFC today, the champion. Give me Islam Makhachev inside the distance. Next, we got the fight that I'm looking forward to more than anything else. Guaranteed fight of the night here. 5 rounds with 2 wild boys in Sean Strickland and Paulo Costa. And I can't say that I'm surprised to see Sean Strickland as the favorite, considering that he's coming off a very close title fight to Dricus du Plessis. He's been one of the best middleweights on the roster for the last couple of years. On the other side, you got Paulo Costa, who's a guy with plot armor. He doesn't appear to lose any stock during long periods of inactivity or even losses, but taking this fight, especially with 5 rounds here in the co-main event spot, shows that he's serious about picking up that activity, which is really cool because not only is it nice to see Paulo Costa fight, but outside of that fight with Israel Adesanya, we've never seen anyone run through Costa before. The dude brings it every time, and a lot of the same things could be said about Sean Strickland, so you can make a case for either man here. It's a tough fight to pick. For me, I do think that Paulo Costa is the more durable guy. It's good that Sean Strickland doesn't have a ton of power that works in Costa's favor. It also would seem like Costa's at a cardio disadvantage, but I don't know if that's true. He's got that weird cardio where he looks gassed, but he remains dangerous throughout the fight, like a bigger version of Alexandr Pantoja. So he could have success later in this fight, possibly. And I say possibly because we know that Sean Strickland uses a lot of forward movement, keeps that jab pumping, he throws those teeps to the body, he breaks guys down, and if he keeps that jab in Costa's mug, stays busy, works the body, keeps him on the back foot, I can see him starting to pull away in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds. But again, who knows? Because you look at that fight with Marvin Vettori for Paulo Costa, he came in at 300 pounds on fight night and was able to go out there and fight a hard 5 rounds. So it's tough one way or the other. I do like that Paulo Costa can have bigger moments here. I think that he can end up hurting Sean Strickland more than Strickland probably hurts him. Strickland's got better hands and better activity with his punches, but I do think that Paulo Costa's got better kicks. We saw how loose and how fast and how snappy those those kicks looked against Robert Whittaker, and not just when he wobbled him toward the end of the round with the wheel kick, but also just the high kicks that he was throwing, even the ones that didn't get home. They were coming up fast, and it's surprising to see a dude that big, that muscle bound, throwing kicks that fast and that smooth. But for Sean Strickland, obviously we like the things that we mentioned, like the pace and the mentality and the way that he fights, but also that striking defense, that poise that he has in the pocket. And Paulo Costa's a guy who likes to brawl. I think Paulo Costa has a lot of presence in there. He can intimidate guys, but I don't think he intimidates Sean Strickland. Sean Strickland's going to stay right in the pocket, trade with him, get that Philly shell going, staying busy, throwing more punches. So as far as a pick goes, I'm a bit torn here because you can make a strong case for either side. So since I'm in this position, I look at the betting odds and I let that make the decision for me. I think this fight is a pick'em, or at least should be closer to a pick'em. The line is a bit wide. I see value on the dog. I think these guys are going to go to war. I think it's going to be an extremely competitive fight from both guys. So paying minus 225, minus 250 for Sean Strickland just doesn't make sense to me in this spot. Now, Sean Strickland's the better minute winner, and I don't think anybody's going to argue that. Sean Strickland is a better minute winner than Paulo Costa, and typically when you win more minutes, you win more rounds, you win the fight. So I expect Strickland to win more minutes in this fight, but Costa can produce bigger moments. To me, he really only needs about 3 to 5 big moments in this fight. Times where he wobbles Strickland or lands a nice shot like a head kick that's partially blocked, or a big combination to end a round that steals the round that he was losing. That's how Paulo Costa can win the fight. Big swings in momentum at different points in the fight that end up winning him the rounds, getting the crowd involved. So I like the underdog in this one. Give me the secret juice. Give me the people's champ. Give me Paulo Costa to win this fight by decision. Next, we have a fight between Kevin Holland and Michal Oleksieczjuk. Kevin Holland has got to be the hardest fighter to get a read on in the UFC. You never know what you're going to get. Kevin Holland is, in fact, like a box of chocolates. Now, he's got fast hands. He's got good jiu-jitsu, tough as nails, great in-fight trash talk, doesn't really get tired in these fights, and is willing to fight anybody. That's what you love about him. What you hate about him is that he's losing a lot. He's 12-8 in the UFC, has a no contest on the record from the fight against Kyle Daukaus because of the clash of heads, but Kyle Daukaus was working him up until that point and probably went on to win that fight. So you can argue that he'd be 12-9 in the promotion, which is obviously not a great record. Now, he has some good wins. He has a win over Gerald Mearshart in his debut, although that's a fight you never want to watch again. Don't watch it back. I dare you not to watch it back. He also has a fast knockout win over Fluffy Hernandez, who's running through the division. Actually hasn't lost since that fight with Kevin Holland. He knocked out Joaquin Buckley. He beat Santiago Ponzinibbio, finished Michael Chiesa. The guy's got good wins, very strong performances along the way. But there are times where he's been physically outmatched, like against Brendan Allen, for example, Derek Brunson, Marvin Vettori, Hamzat Chimaev. Now, these are excusable losses, yes. But there are times where he wasn't physically outmatched, but you got to call the fight IQ into question, like against Wonderboy. He could have dominated with his grappling in that fight, made the conscious decision to not grapple, and just got battered because of it, and it didn't really make any sense. Like, there was no reason for that. You get half of your money, take unnecessary damage, another loss on your record, lose stock, all in an attempt to please the fans, and it really didn't do that. And then against Michael Venom Page, he lost that fight because he mentally checked out of it. He landed 2 significant strikes in the 3rd round, and I totally understand that Michael Venom Page is a very tricky fight, about as tricky as they come, impossible to game plan for, could be very confusing when you see that for the first time. I get that. The loss itself is excusable, but what's not really excusable is landing 2 significant strikes in the 3rd round of a fight that was 1-1 going into the 3rd. So he's an impossible guy to get a read on. Very hard to trust Kevin Holland. I like me some Kevin Holland. I think everybody watching does, but again, just a wild card. You never know what you're going to get from him. Now he's got to deal with Mikey O, and Lord Michal is a handful. Powerful striker, not afraid to take one to give one, lands heavy very often, sneaky hand speed, fights longer than he looks. On top of that, he's a very strong finisher. Once he has guys hurt, he's typically getting them out of there right away. And we've seen that in his last 4 wins, and if he catches anybody cleanly, they're going down, Kevin Holland included, even though he's got a great chin. What I don't like for Lord Michal in this fight, however, is that he's dealing with a lot of length, superior speed, I would say, a better grappler as well, who can win this fight with ease if he decides to get it to the mat. And I'd love to take a dog shot on Michal Oleksieczjuk, I really would, but he's at a 7-inch reach disadvantage, he's at a grappling disadvantage, the toughness that Kevin Holland brings, plus the small losing streak that Kevin Holland is on makes me believe that he's going to come into this super motivated, super serious, very hungry, and Kevin Holland is moving back up to middleweight, which is interesting, so I'll take him here. And a sneaky prop to look out for this week would be Kevin Holland by submission. That's not the prop of the week. The prop of the week is going to be my favorite prop at the juiciest lines. You want the prop of the week? You want it for free? Let me tell you how to get it. You can go right onto KunithMMA.com, right down there where it says get free betting picks and tips. You could put your information information in, just your name, your email. You'll be added to the email list that is about 900 people deep. Each week I will be sending out the prop of the week. That is completely free. Now, if you want access to everything else like the DFS strategy guide, lineup optimizer, official betting article, things like that, you can go right up to plans and grab that. And I'll say 4 out of the last 5 events, profitable events. We got a bit of a hot streak, if you will. So feel free to check out KunithMMA.com, even if it's just for your free prop of the week, because why not? And it will not be Kevin Holland by submission. However, that's how I think this fight goes. Give me Big Mouth, give me the Trailblazer, give me Kevin Holland to win this fight by submission. Next, we have a fight between Jailton Almeida and Alexandr Romanov. Jailton Almeida luckily gets to go back to fighting stiff-legged, poor takedown defense having heavyweights. And we've seen Jailton Almeida run through guys in the UFC by shooting a double leg, getting on his knees, crawling over with his toes, getting on top of guys and just smashing them into the canvas until they give up their backs. And honestly, at this weight class, it's a good recipe. And he's great at it. He's great at it when it works. He can win fights at the heavyweight division just like that for years. Now, last time out, he gassed out in 5 minutes against Curtis Blaydes, was ultimately knocked out in the second round. Now, we picked Curtis Blaydes in that fight to win by knockout for the simple facts that he is a wrestler in the heavyweight division. There aren't many of those. He's got decent cardio. He knows what to do in the clinch. And even in that fight, Jailton Almeida took him down 8 times or something like that in the first round. He was tripping him, rematting him, tripping him, rematting him. And Curtis Blaydes kept working back up to his feet. Most guys in the heavyweight division aren't going to be able to do that, and even if they are, they're going to be so dead and so gassed in the second round that they're not going to be able to do it again. But Curtis Blaydes is a completely different animal than Alexandr Romanov. Blaydes is an elite heavyweight that fought a smart game plan, showed his patience, waited for his opportunity. Jailton Almeida is going to lose to guys like that each and every time. Elite fighters in the division with good cardio are going to win, but he does not have that in front of him this week. At range, he's going to be so much faster than Alexandr Romanov. Romanov's going to really struggle when he does get put on his back early in this fight, and I think Jailton Almeida is going to get it done in 1. I think we'll see him finish from a similar position that we saw Alexander Volkov put Alexandr Romanov in, where he's just going to be able to get to his back, land some strikes, get him out of there. Jailton Almeida wins by knockout. Don't overthink it. If you don't want to get greedy with the knockout line, you could take Jailton Almeida inside the distance, but either way, he's getting it done. I'd probably take inside the round 1 prop, if anything, but we don't have to get too deep. Very simple, very straightforward. Jailton Almeida is still that dude. Next, we have a very tough fight between welterweight strikers with Rude Boy Randy Brown fighting Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos. Oscar, why does it not say Dos Santos on the screen? Oh, you thought they would just know. And what does assuming do, Oscar? It makes what? Get out of my sight. A lot to like about Randy Brown, of course, being the taller, longer, younger man, but Zaleski dos Santos is no pushover. We saw him go blow for blow last time out with Rinat Fakhretdinov in a fight where most people, myself included, expected him to get destroyed, and that did not happen. He actually could have won that fight. But once again, the old Brazilian shows that he's not a walk in the park for anybody. He actually survived an early storm in that fight, one that most guys would have just packed it in, said I'm good. But not Capoeira. No. He fought through that early storm, was able to get back into that fight, and he was the fresher man in the 3rd round. Now on the other side, Randy Brown looked great last time out when he slept Muslim Salikov in the 1st round, and I like Randy Brown a lot because when he starts going, when he gets into a flow, he's very hard to stop. He's a guy who can fight with a lot of confidence. He uses his length very well. He moves pretty well. He's got a decent chin on him, and this fight is interesting. I think it's an extremely competitive fight because both guys are going to strike primarily. I don't think this fight goes to the mat at all, and if it does, it's going to be for a few seconds. Both guys can take one to give one. They're not worried about that. Cardio's not going to be an issue on either side, and they both tend to be in pretty close fights. To go a step further, to me, when you look at their level of competition that they've fought side by side, it's pretty similar levels of competition. And I think most people are just going to be drawn to the bigger fighter, the younger fighter, but I can see the slight dog in Zaleski dos Santos leaving the Prudential Center with a win here, and I think that's what's going to happen. I expect him to land with a little bit more power. There's not really going to be a threat of the takedown coming back his way, so if the fight is purely stand-up, I think we do have the slightly better striker in the Brazilian this week. I think we have the better athlete in Randy Brown, but I think we have the better striker in Elizeu Zaleski dos Santos, so give me the old dog, give me Zaleski dos Santos to win this fight by decision. Next, we have a great fight between Cesar Almeida and Roman Kopylov. Y'all must have forgot. Roman Kopylov is a monster. He breaks guys down with his striking. He's super accurate, mixes it up like very few can in the sport today. Great punches, works the body well, finishes combinations with high kicks. The guy can do it all, and he can also wrestle if he wants to. That's a luxury that Cesar Almeida does not have. He's got 3 times the MMA experience. He's faced a lot of guys in the UFC that have a lot of UFC experience. That cannot be said for Cesar Almeida. And I know a lot of people are going to point to Cesar Almeida. I know a lot of people are going to talk about Cesar Almeida winning a kickboxing match against Alex Pereira. That was when I was a junior in high school. Look at me. It was some time ago. You know what wasn't some time ago? When he was getting taken down 3 times by Dylan Budka, who gassed hard and would have won that fight probably if he didn't come in on short notice. He was also taken down 3 times in the Contender Series, but now he's got to fight somebody who is more experienced than anybody he's seen before, a more well-rounded fighter with a more well-rounded skill set, is going to be able to trade with him on the feet unlike any MMA fighter has in his career so far. And to me, this seems like a great buy low spot for Roman Kopylov, because if he hadn't fought Fluffy Hernandez last time out, if he wasn't coming off of that loss, he'd be minus 250 here as opposed to being the underdog. And I expect him to look like a minus 250 price tag this week when he comes out there and is faster than Almeida, leans on his wrestling, and wins these rounds. So give me Roman Kopylov to win this fight by decision. And real quick, if you haven't already, like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm, because when you know how the algorithm works. Next, we have a grappler's delight at lightweight, while we have the wrestler in Grant Dawson fighting the BJJ black belt in Joe Solecki. And I am blissfully aware that they are both black belts in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but it just feels more fitting to call Joe Solecki the BJJ black belt in this matchup because the man's been doing it since he was 6 years old. Both guys are looking to get back on track after suffering bad and downright embarrassing losses in their most recent fights. You got Grant Dawson was a huge favorite over Bobby Green, first main event spot in his UFC career, knocked out in about 30 seconds by King Bobby. That doesn't really happen all that often. On the other side, Joe Solecki got slammed on his head and knocked out while looking for a submission on Drakkar Klose. That's something that also doesn't really happen. So both guys absolutely looking to right the ship here. For Solecki, he's going to be looking for submissions while Grant Dawson shooting for a lot of takedowns, so I expect some guillotine attempts on the way down, possible sweeps from bottom position, while Dawson's going to be looking to take Solecki's back as often as possible. And Grant Dawson has some of the best back takes in the UFC. Very hard to get him off your back once he locks that body triangle up. I do give Grant Dawson the edge in striking. I don't think that's a huge surprise to anybody. I don't think that really matters or makes a difference. I think both of these guys not only are so comfortable fighting on the mat, but they want to fight on the mat. That it's almost like a silent agreement. Like, yeah, let's meet down there. It's going to be a grappling match. It's going to be a boring fight for people who don't love to watch the grappling, and it's okay. If you're an MMA fan, you don't love watching grappling all the time, that's okay. Don't let people online say things like, oh, it's MMA, the grappling's a part of it. If you think it's boring, you go watch kickboxing. Shut up. Grappling is cool. It's a necessary part of it. This is what separates it from something like boxing and kickboxing, but sometimes it's boring, and it's okay to admit that. But I think we might have a pretty boring fight on our hands with Grant Dawson and Joe Solecki, because Joe Solecki probably not going to get rear naked choked. Grant Dawson probably not going to get off of his back once he gets there. So give me 3 straight rounds of back control, rinse and repeat from start to finish. Grant Dawson gets his hand raised this week. Give me Grant Dawson to win this fight by decision. Next, we have another set of fighters looking to get back on track. You got Phil Rowe and Jake Matthews, both coming off of losses last time out. Phil Rowe lost a split decision to Neil Magny. Very weird fight that was. They spent more than half of it in the clinch, and we know that Phil Rowe's not going to throw a ton of strikes, but he's typically looking for the knockout shot the entire time, even if the fight is at a slow pace. But it was a strange fight, and he's going to look back on that, realize he took little to no damage in that fight, probably watched the tape and was really upset with himself, so I expect him to come out a lot more aggressive this week. And on the other side, you've got Jake Matthews, who has a ton of experience, especially UFC experience. The guy's pretty much grown up in the promotion, joined the promotion at a very young age, has had a ton of fights. He is too coming off of a loss to Michael Morales, no shame in that, outlanded, outpointed, outgunned physically, but Michael Morales is that dude. What I don't like for Jake Matthews, if we had to nitpick, is the quality of wins. He's been in the UFC for a long time. He's won 12 fights in the UFC. Li Jingliang, who is missing, I don't know where he's at. I see things all the time saying that no one knows where he's at. He beat the Leech a couple of years ago. That is by far his best win. Outside of that, he has no wins over anybody who is either currently on the roster or is on the roster but has a win in the UFC, if that makes any sense at all. The only other person outside of the Leech who is still on the UFC roster who Jake Matthews has beaten is Darius Flowers, who is 0-2, and I promise you will not win a fight in the UFC. Now, does that automatically mean that he's going to lose? Of course course not. But do I think he should be favored? No. I think that Phil Rowe is the much better striker here. He's going to land a lot harder. We've seen Jake Matthews cracked before. On top of that, Phil Rowe has been actively improving his grappling, or at least trying to. You see him going to all these grappling competitions all the time. Is he winning? No, but he's trying. And Jake Matthews is not some generational grappling talent by any means. So I think if the fight hits the mat, Phil Rowe will be just fine. And if it doesn't hit the mat, that 8.5-inch reach is going to loom very large this week. So give me Phil Rowe to win this fight by knockout. Next, we're looking at a rematch between old welterweights. And when these guys were young welterweights, they fought. They fought once. Niko Price finished Alex Morono, but then he popped for marijuana. You can't have the devil's lettuce in your system, kid. You can't be on that giggle bush, that piff, that dro, that sticky icky, none of that.
Stay off the weed.
But Alex Morono has a chance to get his revenge here, and he probably will. Alex Morono is as solid as they come, good at everything, not great at anything, but good at everything. Super experienced, not a guy who's going to fight for the title, but not a guy who's ever going to turn down a fight, and not a guy who has ever had back-to-back losses in his career. These guys have entered the UFC around the same time, but Alex Morono's been way more active since the both of them have entered. You've got Niko Price, who's been finished in 6 out of 7 of his losses in the promotion, while Morono's only been finished twice out of 6 losses in the promotion. I like the steadiness from Alex Morono, especially in this fight, and I like the striking defense. I think he has much better striking defense than Niko Price. I'd argue better jiu-jitsu as well. Niko Price has won fights in the past with crazy, unorthodox technique, while Morono has won with a more traditional style, not taking as many chances, more risk-averse. And that's why Niko Price has a way higher finishing rate than Alex Morono, but Morono has more wins and is going to fight for longer. And from a betting perspective, I typically like the chaotic style, but when it clashes with someone who's just good at everything and is going to keep everything nice and tight, I'll go with the steadier guy. I'll go with the more predictable guy. Give me Alex Morono to win this fight by decision. Next, we have an odd one between Gall and Basil Haffez. If there's a guy I like to root for, it is Gall. If his career had gone differently, I think he could have been a big name in the UFC potentially, but now I worry he might be a loss or two away from boxing on the same cards as Paige Van Zandt. In hindsight, his run as a professional MMA fighter was doomed from the start. Getting a UFC contract only one fight into his career, was he Brock Lesnar? And he gets matched up with guys like Mike Jackson, not a fighter, CM Punk, definitely not a fighter, and Sage Northcutt, who he caught at the right time. But then it was all downhill from there. He's just had a weird run, and it makes you wonder, had he developed on the regional scene before getting to the big show, he would have either been much better of a fighter than he is now at 32, or had a normal job like most of us, frankly. And he's really up against it this week because he's dealing with a beast of a man in Basil Haffez. We saw Haffez have a lot of success against Jack Della Maddalena, arguably won that fight. Will I tell you if I think he won that fight? Yes, I will, because he did. He ate some of Jack Della Maddalena's absolute best shots and just kept fighting shots that put other men down pretty consistently. So it was really impressive, and I think that physically he's just going to be way too much for Gall here. I see him taking Gall down with ease, submitting him in the first round. He's a very big favorite, and for very good reason. I think he's going to win a decent amount of fights in the UFC over the next 3 to 4 years. He's not the youngest guy in the world, but he's got some time. I think he wins this fight, wins a handful of fights in the UFC. Give me Basil Haffez to win this fight by submission. Next, we have a fight between Ailin Perez and Joselyne Edwards. I don't like the idea of laying chalk on Ailin Perez, but man, oh man, is Joselyne Edwards going to get wet blanketed for 3 rounds. And I'm not normally a connoisseur or an aficionado of MMA math, but I do have some for you here. Lucy Pudilova racked up 7 minutes and 29 seconds of control time when she fought Joselyne Edwards. Ailin Perez racked up 8 minutes and 36 seconds of control time over Lucy Pudilova. So that tells us that Perez is going to get just over 16 minutes of control time in this fight, which means that she's going to land her first takedown while Bruce Buffer is doing the introductions. No, but in all seriousness though, Ailin Perez is going to get takedowns every round. Joselyne Edwards is going to be flatter than a pancake. I'm talking true level, and it's going to look very easy for Ailin Perez this week, who's not going to stop. Even if she gets denied 1 or 2 takedowns, she's not going to stop. She's going to get to the clinch, drop her level, look for takedowns. Now at range, I do think that Joselyne Edwards is a bit sharper, a bit faster, but not powerful enough to get enough respect on the feet. I think Ailin Perez walks through whatever she's getting thrown her way, and she ultimately gets the takedowns that she's looking for, ultimately wins the fight because of it. So give me Ailin Perez to win this fight by decision. Lastly, we have a fight between Andre Lima and Mitch Raposo. Mitch Raposo is making his UFC debut on short notice as a replacement fighter. You've got Andre Lima coming off of a win in his UFC debut where he was bit and won. I'm sure everywhere you've listened to has talked about that way too much. I've not listened to any videos or seen any videos, but I'm not going to be the guy that talks about the bite heard around the world for the whole video. You know what happened. Before that fight was stopped, Andre Lima looked good, and so did the other guy for what it was worth. Both of them were landing heavy, but we saw that Lima was very clean, very accurate, looked calm while fighting at a very frantic pace against the guy who was powerful, fast, and looked good in his own right. Now, Mitch Raposo, who I have admittedly not seen too much of, is in a very unfortunate and all too common position that these young people find themselves in. You're a fighter. You want to get to the UFC eventually so that you can make more money. While you're on the regional scene, you're winning fights, whatever, then you get a call. Hey, it's the UFC. Do you want to fight this guy this weekend? It's the call you've been waiting for. You can't say no to the call because let's say you say no, maybe that call never happens again. Maybe you get injured, you never get that call again. Whatever the case may be, if that call comes in, you pretty much have to take it and you have to accept the offer. But here's the thing, if you're some mid fighter, if you're some, for lack of a better word, bum fighter on the UFC card, somebody who's at the bottom of the card that isn't an Andre Lima, it isn't a 25-year-old undefeated prospect who looks damn good, you could just be anybody, then they're not giving you that call. They're only calling you to fight savages like this, so then you show up on your 4-fight deal and go 0-1 right away. It's very unfortunate. So the young man who is obviously talented enough to get the call, fights at a good gym from what I've gathered, he's in a very tough spot. He did lose on Contender Series against Jake Hadley, went back and watched that, not all that impressive, and now he's got a guy in Andre Lima who's better than Jake Hadley. I like Lima's game, does everything well, fights like a guy who's been doing it for a lot longer than a 25-year-old would, a lot of amateur experience brought up the right way. I see him landing more strikes here, landing cleaner strikes, mixing in takedowns as well. Again, somebody who fights not like somebody who's 25 years old looking to take your head off, but as a seasoned veteran. So he's not afraid to be patient, go the distance, and I think that's what happens here as he moves to 2-0 in the UFC. Give me Andre Lima to win this fight by decision. If you've made it to this point in the video, thank you so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, comment something for the algorithm, go grab your prop of the week from KunithMMA.com, and I will see you later in the week for final picks. Let's go.